Everything you think you know about Hades is probably wrong. He wasn't the Greek version of Satan, he wasn't constantly trying to overthrow Zeus, and he wasn't even the one who killed people. The real story is so much more compelling. Hey guys, my name is Jason, I'm a fantasy author, and I work with these myths every day. I love getting past the modern, watered-down version of these tales, and that's what this channel, Myth HQ, is all about. So mark my words, by the end of this episode, you will never see Hades, the Underworld, or a pomegranate the same way again. So let's start with his name, Hades. In Proto-Greek, it was Aoides, which means the unseen one. So this wasn't a name meant to inspire terror, it was more of a description. He was the god you couldn't see, ruling a kingdom separate from the sunlit world of the living. But humans have a knack for fearing what they can't see, and the Greeks were no different. They were so terrified of attracting his attention that they avoided saying his name altogether. Instead, they used euphemisms. They called him Pluton, the wealthy one, because all of the precious metals and fertile soil came from his domain beneath the earth. They called him Clemenus, the renowned, or Eubuleus, the good counselor. They called him anything but Hades, hoping that if they didn't speak his name, he wouldn't come looking for them. And this fear is the seed of his villainous reputation, a reputation he never actually earned. The god of the dead was not a monster, he was just misunderstood. And his story begins long before he became king, in the belly of his own father. Before the Olympians, there were the Titans. The king and queen of the universe were Cronus and Rhea, and they had a problem. After Cronus had violently overthrown his own father, he received a prophecy that one of his children would do the same to him. Paranoid and desperate to keep his power, Cronus came up with a uniquely horrifying solution. As Rhea gave birth to their children, he swallowed each one whole. First Hestia, then Demeter, then Hera, then came their first son, Hades. Cronus swallowed him too, followed by his brother Poseidon. Rhea was horrified, so when her sixth child, Zeus, was born, she gave birth in secret on the island of Crete. She then wrapped a large stone in swaddling clothes and presented it to her husband. Cronus, apparently not one for due diligence, devoured the rock without a second glance. Years later, the hidden Zeus grew to adulthood, learning of his siblings' fate, and plotted his revenge. He managed to trick Cronus into drinking a potion that forced him to regurgitate his children. They were emerged fully grown in the reverse order that they were eaten. This means Hades, the first son swallowed, was the last to be freed, making him technically both the eldest and the youngest of his brothers. This strange paradoxical birthright was a fitting start for a god who would forever live between worlds. But their freedom was just the beginning, so now they had a war to win. What followed was the Titanomachy, a brutal 10-year war between the new Olympian gods and the old Titans. The war was at a stalemate until Zeus freed two groups of beings that Cronus had imprisoned in Tartarus, the hundred-headed Hecatoncheires and the Cyclopes. In gratitude, the Cyclopes forged three legendary weapons for the freed brothers. Zeus received the Thunderbolt, Poseidon the Trident, and Hades was given the Kyne, the Helm of Darkness, a cap that rendered its wearer completely invisible. With these new allies and weapons, the Olympians finally defeated the Titans and banished them to Tartarus. The war was over, and now it was time to divide the spoils. There was no grand decree from Zeus. Instead, the three brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, drew lots to divide the cosmos. Zeus drew the sky, Poseidon the seas, and Hades drew the vast, unseen realm beneath the earth, the Underworld. And this is critical, because Zeus didn't banish his brother to the Underworld as a punishment. Hades wasn't a bitter, resentful god plotting to escape his gloomy prison. He received his kingdom by chance as an equal to his brothers, and he was a king within a domain as vital to cosmic order as the sky or the sea. By the way, I choose not to have sponsors, affiliates, or mid-roll ads on these videos because this channel is completely self-funded, but I do have something I think you'll enjoy, and that's my Fantasy All-Access Library. It's where you can get every mythology-inspired fantasy book that my team and I have written, all set in a huge shared universe where every pantheon coexists. It's how I'm able to make these videos, so if that sounds interesting, you should check out the link in the description. For the most part, Hades was content to remain in his realm, managing the endless flow of souls, and he rarely ventured into the world above. But there is one story that defines his legacy more than any other, and that's the abduction of his queen Persephone. Persephone was the daughter of Zeus and Demeter, the goddess of the harvest. Hades saw her and fell in love, but he knew the overprotective Demeter would never approve of the match. So he went to his brother Zeus, who secretly gave him permission for the abduction. One day, as Persephone was picking flowers, the earth split open. Hades thundered out on his black chariot, grabbed the terrified goddess, and dragged her down into his kingdom to be his queen. Demeter was consumed by grief, and for 9 days she searched the earth, her sorrow so profound that she forbade any crops from growing. The world world withered as a result, and humanity began to starve. The cries of mortals and the complaints of other gods who weren't getting their sacrifices forced Zeus to act. He sent Hermes to the underworld to demand Persephone's return. Hades agreed. He wasn't a monster holding a hostage. However, he was clever. Just before Persephone left, he offered her a pomegranate. She ate a few seeds. Some say this was trick, others that she ate them willingly, but the result was the same. By consuming the food of the underworld, she became bound to it forever. A compromise was reached, and Persephone would spend part of the year with her mother on Earth and the other part in the underworld with Hades. This myth became the Greeks' explanation for the season. When Persephone returns, spring blooms, and when she descends, winter falls. It also marked the beginning of a true marriage, as Persephone grew into her role not as a prisoner, but as the powerful and respected queen of the underworld. So what was this kingdom that Hades ruled? The underworld wasn't the Christian version of hell. For most, it was just gray. To get there, a soul first had to cross the river Styx, ferried by the grim boatman Chiron. The price was a coin placed in the mouth of the deceased, which is why proper burials were so important to the Greeks. Without payment, a soul was doomed to wander the banks for a century. Now at the gates stood Cerberus, the infamous three-headed dog. His job wasn't to keep souls out, but to ensure none ever left. Once inside, most ordinary souls ended up in the fields of Asphodel, a vast, dreary meadow where they wandered as listless shades, neither punished nor rewarded. But judgment did in fact exist. Three demigod judges, we have Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Acus, assessed the life of each soul. The truly virtuous were sent to Elysium, a paradise of eternal spring. The truly wicked, those who committed heinous crimes against gods or mortals, were cast into Tartarus, a pit of eternal punishment. Hades himself wasn't a judge or a torturer, he was the administrator, the king who made sure the laws of life and death were impartially enforced. He was stern, unyielding, and above all, just. Another massive misconception is confusing Hades with the Grim Reaper. Hades was the god of the dead, not the god of death. He didn't kill anyone or collect souls from the living, and that was a job of a different lesser deity, Thanatos, the literal personification of death. Thanatos was a quiet, shadowy figure, the son of night and darkness. When a mortal's time was up, it was Thanatos who came for them, guiding their soul to the underworld. Hades simply received them upon arrival. So think of it like this. Thanatos was the paramedic who brings you to the hospital, and Hades was the hospital administrator who gives you your room assignment. The Greeks' own myths make this distinction quite clear. The clever king Sisyphus once managed to chain up Thanatos, and for a short time, no one on Earth could die. He directly outsmarted death. You could never do that to Hades. Challenging the king of the underworld was a far more serious offense, as Sisyphus would later learn when he was sentenced to an eternity of rolling a boulder up a hill. Unlike his Olympian relatives, who were constantly meddling in mortal affairs, Hades was remarkably neutral and uninterested in the world above. He was defined by his fairness, and this is best seen with his encounters with the few mortals brave enough to enter his kingdom alive. When the musician Orpheus journeyed to the underworld to retrieve his dead wife, he didn't fight his way in. He played his lyre, and his song was so full of sorrow that it moved the unmovable king. Hades wept an iron tear and granted his request, allowing Eurydice to return to life on one condition. Orpheus must not look back at her until they were both fully in the sunlight. Tragically, Orpheus failed at the last moment, but the point stands. Hades was capable of profound compassion. When Heracles arrived for his 12th labor to capture Cerberus, he didn't just attack the beast, he asked Hades for permission. Recognizing the hero's divine quest, Hades agreed with the simple conditions that Heracles not harm the dog and return him when the labor was complete. He was reasonable and he respected protocol. He wasn't a villain to be defeated, but a king whose permission had to be earned. Of course, he wasn't a pushover. When the hero Theseus and Pirithous tried to kidnap his wife Persephone, Hades didn't fly into a rage. He calmly invited them to a feast, then tricked them into sitting on the chairs of forgetfulness, which magically bound them for eternity. His justice was swift, creative, and perfectly suited to the crime. So Hades wasn't a villain. He was a stern, solitary king who valued order and balance above all else. He was the unseen one, the wealthy one, the just one, a complex god whose true story has been buried under centuries of misunderstanding. And if you enjoy digging into these deeper truths about mythology, you'll probably love my community, the Fantasy All Access Library. It's an exclusive group on a platform called School where you go even deeper. Memberships get you weekly live calls with me, immediate access to my entire library of ebooks and audiobooks, plus a brand new novel every single month, often more. We talk myths, we talk fantasy, and we build this world together. The link is in the description if you want to join us. And I'll see you in the next video.